Hello. So a very different journey today, as you see. I am not where I normally am. I am walking next to a motorway of sorts. Yeah, long story. I'm not going to tell it here because it's not really pertinent to the subject of today's video. But today I've got 30 minutes to walk to the metro, so I thought, hey, let's make a cheeky video whilst I can. So the topic of today's video is something that people often ask me. I'm not sure if I covered it that much in my first video, my #1 Hello World video, and that is, how did I know? Oh, there goes a bus that I could have got. Really packed. Good. I'm glad I'm not on it. Yeah, so how did I know? How did I know that I'm transgender? Okay, no more motorway. So how did I know? And this topic was kind of triggered from something that Carolina and I were watching over the weekend. We encountered several YouTube videos called the most popular songs of the 80s, the 2000s, the 90s, and we watched them all. They were really good for nostalgicizing. It was really fun. But I watched those videos and a lot of memories came back to me, a lot of things that I had not forgotten, but just put to the back of my mind because other things had sort of cropped up as I lived my life, basically. And yeah, a lot of very foundational kind of thoughts as I was watching this. I remember distinctly watching a lot of these music videos, listening to these songs, wishing I was those performers, wishing I was the girls in the video. The video to Lambada, for example, features a young girl who would have been around about the same age I was at the time. And I was thinking, why could I not be her? And that was part of that dawning realization of who I was, who I am. And, you know, going back to what I was saying about they saw the TV glue, I think one of the reasons why that film resonated with me so much was because of how I would see people in the media, and I would always want to be that female star. As I said in the Glow video, the Beverly Crushes, the Clarissa explains it all, sorry. I would want to be them. That's who I aspired to be. I love Polish street names. They're so literal sometimes. But this street is Encyclopedia Street. I feel quite comfortable saying that because I don't think anyone's going to be doxing me. This isn't where I normally live, as you probably know. Look at this pipe next to me. Okay. So anyway, so I would see these girls, I would see these women, and I'd be thinking, that's who I want to be growing up to be. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I knew I was trans at the time. It just meant that I had these thoughts, these urges going on in my head. But because, as I've said before, there was no knowledge of what transgender or being transgender means in like the cultural lexicon, which is a nice word for Encyclopedia Street. I couldn't really put two and two together until much longer. So that meant my childhood was a very confusing and very lonely place, because as far as I knew, nobody else had these same kind of thoughts or desires. It's kind of ironic that it's such a beautiful sunny day here in Warsaw, because other places in Poland are under floods. It's crazy. We don't see those here. Anyway, scary and lonely, and also quite frightening, because although the notion of being transgender and the idea that one can transition wasn't really something that I understood or knew of, there were references to creepy men who pretended to be women, and so that made me wonder, is that me? Am I such a creepy person that I'm to be made a mockery of? And you know, that idea, that thought, that paralyzed me. I never thought that this was something I'd ever be able to share with another person, because look at the kind of hatred that such people face. It's a bit of a nightmare, really. So yeah, it was hidden, it was kept under lock and key for several years, and that's where I thought it would always stay, to be honest. So what changed? What made me think, well, okay, first of all, I'm transgender, and second of all, this is something that I'm comfortable sharing with other people? Well, I suppose that realization, a lot of people, and I've talked about the cracking of the egg in another video, and I think in that same one I talk about it being a kind of a more slow motion realization for me. Over time, I was able to kind of like filter out the things that I'm not. I was able to determine that this isn't a sexual proclivity, this isn't a fleeting phase, this is a constant central core theme to me. It's not something that I'm confused about, it's not something that I'm like, oh, I don't know if it's X, Y, or Z. I know that I'm transgender. I know that this is who I am, and so it's wild that there are people who constantly tell me that I'm a confused man. It's not true. It's kind of funny, really. But anyway, over time, it took a lot of time to get to that point. I'm hoping that I don't get lost. I've never actually been this way before. It's definitely a bit of an adventure. I'm glad that I've got you to accompany me on this, because I'd be a little bit anxious otherwise. But yeah, it's definitely a different journey to work today. So this is a couple of days later. I'm in the garden. I'm obviously not at work. I'm not going to work because today is Sunday. I have a cat down here by my side. Oh, where's he gone? Where's that cat gone? There he is. There's that cat. So yes, how did I know I'm transgender? So as I said, it was quite a long process where things kind of awakened, but I think the problem wasn't so much knowing that I was, but like all of these little blockers that prevented me from doing anything about it. I've already mentioned the kind of the cultural barriers, and I think as well I was aware of some of the medical gatekeeping that was prevalent in the 90s and 2000s, I suppose. I recently encountered a fairly, I don't know how to put it, interesting grid that illustrates the requirements or the scale of somebody who is, in that type of terminology, transsexual. And I'm sure I remember of being slightly conscious of this and just wondering, however am I going to persuade a medical doctor that I'm transgender enough to warrant medical treatment? And that notion of not being trans enough, you hear that sort of echoing through the forums and other spaces where trans people congregate, and it seems to be a common type of worry that we have. I certainly still have certain anxieties about meeting other trans people because I just don't know how I'll be received. Am I going to be laughed out of the room, be it physical or virtual, because they will deem me not to be trans enough or not to be doing trans in an appropriate way? It definitely froze me and prevented me from doing anything more about it. But as you can tell, I pushed through those fears and here I am today. But it definitely weighed on my mind for a while. So yeah, that's kind of my past history. I've talked a little bit how I broke through those things and that sort of thought process that brought me past those fears and concerns to today, where I'm quite happily and quite openly transgender and quite proud to be so as well. And maybe I'll talk about that again in a future video, but I just wanted to kind of flesh out my past a bit more for those of you who are maybe curious about my experience and journey, but also perhaps how that relates to you. And if you've got similar kind of concerns as well. Look at that cat in the background. Oh my word, he's so cute. Okay, everyone. So take care, take it easy. I'll see you later on. Enjoy your week. Goodbye.